Members of a local postal workers union are sounding the alarm over proposed changes to the Eastern Maine Processing and Distribution Center in Hamden. They're inviting members of the public to attend a meeting on the topic tomorrow night in Brewer. Recently, postal workers held informational pickets in 5 Maine communities, including Bangor. These pictures are from Saturday's picket in West Market Square. The U.S. Postal Service is considering a consolidation that would move some operations from Hamden to the Scarborough plant. The union's president appeared before Bangor City Council this week, saying the changes would degrade local services. He says time-sensitive mail could be impacted, including prescription medication, absentee ballots, and college applications.
The processing operation they're considering moving to southern Maine is the cancellation. Now that's the postmark that's put onto the mail once the Postal Service takes custody of it. And that ensures the timestamp for anything that's time sensitive. It has to be in the mail by a deadline. So that could be delayed 1 or 2 days or more.
The public meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 4 p.m. at Jeff's Catering in Brewer. The U.S. Postal Service is expected to share initial results of a review of the Hamden facility, as well as take questions and feedback from the public.